I mentioned at the beginning of the show that I also wanted to talk about money and the Republican Party. This is a hysterical little graphic. DemocraticUnderground.com puts up a graphic every day. They do 5 a week, and they got some great graphics guy. It's from, what was the date on this? This is a couple of days ago. And it says, on April 16th, the Republican-controlled U.S. House of Representatives passed a bill repealing the estate tax on inherited assets worth more than $5.4 million. This tax cut only goes to 5,400 of America's richest families, which accounts for 0.2% of U.S. taxpayers, and it increases the deficit by $270 billion over 10 years. Keep in mind, by the way, the cost of all public college education tuition in the United States every year is only $61 billion. This would increase our deficit. This would cost us $270 billion over a decade. The bill passed 240 to 179, with 223 Republicans voting for it and 176 Democrats voting against it. Coincidentally, some of the politicians who voted for it are also part of the 0.2%. And then they got the picture of this Tea Party guy with a tea bag hanging from his tri-cornered hat, and he says, "This tiny handful of multimillionaires are taxed enough already, so let's add billions to the deficit to help them out." Hey, wait a minute. Yeah, the Tea Party, you're suckers, guys. Tea Partiers, you're suckers. They have played you. There is a Senator Sanders, Bernie Sanders, pointed this out apparently a couple of days ago. This is over at credoaction.com, and they're sending out an email, Stand with Bernie. Bernie Sanders has figured out how President Obama can close massive tax loopholes with a few strokes of a pen, and he needs our help. The petition to President Obama, which Bernie is pushing out, says, use your executive, the Treasury Department and the IRS to end tax giveaways to large corporations, multimillionaire hedge fund managers, and the worst of the 1% that will cost America over $100 billion over the next decade, including the check the box, earnings stripping, valuation discount, carried interest, Hewlett-Packard, and real estate investment trust tax loopholes. Close these. Turns out, it doesn't require Congress to close these tax loopholes. The president can do it by executive order. So for whoever the staff person is who gets stuck with the job over at the White House every day of listening to this show, hey, tell somebody about this. That Senator, kick it up to the president. That Senator Sanders is strongly suggesting that the president can close these tax loopholes by executive order. This piece in today's Daily Beast: the super rich have new way to buy elections. During the 2014, this is Robert Federighi and Jonathan Stray at ProPublica. During the 2014 election cycle, $113 million, that's 6% of all money raised by super PACs, went to committees dominated by one donor. In other words, what's happening is billionaires, rather than giving money to Karl Rove's super PAC, they're literally creating their own. It's a one-man super PAC. That was quadruple the 2012 share. 16% of all the super PACs now, of all the money in super PACs, single donor super PACs. The rise of single donor groups is a new example of how changes in campaign finance laws are giving outside influence to a handful of funders. Senator Ted Cruz's bid for Republican presidential nomination would be boosted not by one appointed super PAC, but by 4, each controlled by a single donor or donor family. So how does this work out? Well, here's how it worked out back in 2000. When Jeb Bush was the governor of Florida, and he had this giant pension fund with billions, presumably hundreds of billions of dollars in it. I'm telling you, the best investment, the reason that there is so much money in this town in Washington, D.C. right now, the reason why you can't get a good seat at a decent restaurant without a reservation, the reason why D.C. is gentrifying like there's just no tomorrow, is in the 20 years or so, 30 years or so since 1976, when the Buckley versus Vallejo decision was handed down by the Supreme Court, which was the first decision to say that money, using money for political purposes, is protected by the First Amendment, which is something that the court had never said before, no legislature ever said. This was something that Antonin Scalia pulled out of his backside completely. Since that point in time until today, what's happened is that the best investment you can make is to buy a politician. Case in point. This is from an Books and Liars by Andrew Perez. It actually originally was published in the International Business Times. And it starts out, while Jeb Bush was governor of Florida, state pension officials committed at least $1.7 billion. That's 1,000 million to financial firms whose executives, that's $1,700 million, right? To financial firms whose executives were pioneer fundraisers for his brother's presidential campaign. So a pioneer, a George W. Bush pioneer, is somebody who bundled more than $100,000 for George W. Bush's campaign. Okay, from the Blackstone Group, Stephen Schwartzman bundled together $99,000. And his company, Jeb Bush, for Jeb Bush's brother's presidential campaign, and his company, which is called Blackstone Group, received $150 million from the state of Florida to invest. And, skim their commissions and fees off the top. Spend $99,000, get $150 million. Not bad. This is actually, these guys, Blackstone and Carlyle Group, actually got the very best investments. Robert Grady over at Carlyle Group, he raised $69,000. And the investment commitment from Jeb Bush's administration to Carlyle Group was $275 million. Now, keep in mind, has a relationship with Carlyle, or did. Daddy Bush used to be on the board, or one of the senior guys at Carlyle. And then Florida also paid taxpayer fees to Carlyle Group of $14 million. Deutsche Bank. Jeffrey Amling was the George W. Bush pioneer who worked at Deutsche Bank. He raised $200,000 for the Bushies. He got $450 million for his bank as an investment commitment from the pension fund in Florida. These are the kind of games that this is astonishing, right? I mean, this should be considered a crime. Bradford Freeman, not Brad Freeman of Brad Blog, and Spogley of Freeman Spogley, which I'm assuming is a venture capital firm, they donated $743,000 to W's campaign, and Jeb gave them $50 million. Pretty good investment still, invest a little less than $1 million, make $50 million. Well, actually get $50 million to play with and whatever you can skim off the top. They also got $1.7 million in fees that were paid to them by the state of Florida. Goldman Sachs, Peter Conway, George Walker IV, and Henry Paulson Jr., bundlers, they raised $1.5 million for the George W. Bush campaign in 2000. And so Jeb's, we don't know that therefore Jeb's, but it turns out that Jeb's administration in Florida gave them $150 million to Goldman Sachs to manage and paid them $2.5 million. Hicks Muse, Thomas Hicks, he bundled $189,000 for W, and Jeb gave him $25 million in 2001, plus paid him $1.3 million in fees. J.P. Morgan Chase, Alan Buckwater III, and John O'Connor, they raised $64,000. They got $100 million. Not bad. Stephen Lussing, he raised about $500,000, $499,000, but he got $175 million for his company to administer. Morgan Stanley, that was Lehman Brothers. Morgan Stanley, Bush pioneers John Mack, Richard Powers, Philip Purcell, William Strong, and Palmer Murray. They raised $1.1 million for W. They got $150 million from Jeb. You see how the game is played? We got to bust this up. This is wrong.